Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode we'll be diving into the mysteries of how one man terrified the capital of London and left a lasting impression. Jack the Ripper is the pseudonym given to an unidentified serial killer who operated in the impoverished Whitechapel district of London in the late 1800s. The name Jack the Ripper originated from a series of taunting letters sent to the police and the press, supposedly written by the killer himself. The Ripper's reign of terror occurred during a period known as the Autumn of Terror in 1888. The killer primarily targeted female prostitutes who worked in the Whitechapel area. It is believed that he committed at least 5 murders, known as the Canonical Five, although the exact number of victims remains uncertain. The victims attributed to Jack the Ripper include Marion Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Each victim was brutally murdered and mutilated, with their throats being slashed and their bodies often subjected to extensive post-mortem mutilation. The Ripper's modus operandi and the gruesome nature of the crime sparked widespread panic and fear throughout London. The police investigation into the case was heavily criticized for its failures, as the killer managed to elude capture despite an intensive manhunt and numerous suspects being considered. The early life of Jack the Ripper, including his true identity, remains unknown. Despite extensive research and speculation, no concrete evidence has definitively linked any individual to the crimes. The true identity of Jack the Ripper has remained one of the most enduring mysteries in criminal history. The lack of concrete information about Jack the Ripper's early life is primarily due to the fact that his crimes occurred in the late 1800s, and records from that time period are often incomplete or have been lost over time. Additionally, the killer's identity has been intentionally obscured, making it difficult to trace his background. Various theories and suspects have emerged over the years, but none have been definitively proven. Some researchers have suggested possible candidates based on circumstantial evidence, such as individuals with a history of violence or mental illness. Others have proposed that the killer may have had a background in medicine or surgery due to the level of anatomical knowledge demonstrated in the mutilations. However, it is important to note that these theories are speculative and have not been substantiated with solid evidence. The true identity and early life of Jack the Ripper remain shrouded in mystery, leaving historians, researchers, and true crime enthusiasts fascinated by the case and continuing to explore the available evidence and theories. The murders garnered significant media attention, with sensationalized newspaper reports fueling public fascination and speculation. The case generated various conspiracy theories and suspects, ranging from doctors and butchers to members of the royal family. However, no conclusive evidence linking any individual to the crimes has ever been found. Let's take an in-depth look at 2 of the murders attributed to Jack the Ripper. Marion Nichols, August 31st, 1888. Marion Nichols, also known as Polly Nichols, was a 43-year-old prostitute. Her murder is considered the first in the series of killings attributed to Jack the Ripper. Nichols' body was found on Bucks Row, now Durward Street, in Whitechapel. She had been killed by a deep cut to her throat, which nearly severed her head from her body. Additionally, her abdomen had been mutilated with several deep and jagged incisions. The nature of the injuries suggested that the killer possessed anatomical knowledge or experience. Catherine Eddowes, September 30th, 1888. Catherine Eddowes, a 46-year-old prostitute, was the second victim on the infamous night known as the Double Event. her body was discovered in Mitre Square, also in Whitechapel. Eddowes' throat had been slashed, and her face had been mutilated with deep cuts. The most significant mutilation was the removal and disappearance of her left kidney and a portion of her uterus. This particular aspect of the murder fueled speculation about the Ripper's potential medical knowledge or surgical background. These two murders share certain similarities that align with the pattern attributed to Jack the Ripper. Both victims were prostitutes, their throats were slashed, and their bodies were subjected to significant post-mortem mutilation. The brutality and savagery of the attacks shocked the public and left investigators struggling to comprehend the mind of the killer. It's important to note that the killings of Mary Ann Nichols and Catherine Eddowes were just two among the series of murders attributed to Jack the Ripper. While these two cases highlight the brutality and signature elements of the Ripper's crimes, the other victims experienced similar levels of violence and mutilation. The murders of Jack the Ripper demonstrated a level of anatomical knowledge and precision that suggested the perpetrator had some degree of medical or butchery expertise. The sheer brutality and graphic nature of the crimes, coupled with the killer's ability to elude capture, contributed to the enduring notoriety of Jack the Ripper and the fascination surrounding his identity and motives. The police, media, government response, and public sentiment during the Jack the Ripper murders in London. Police response. The police response to the Jack the Ripper murders was heavily criticized both during and after the investigation. The Whitechapel murders strained the resources and capabilities of the Metropolitan Police. The investigation was hindered by the lack of forensic techniques and the absence of a centralized database of criminal records. The police struggled to gather evidence and faced difficulties in coordinating efforts among different police divisions. Despite efforts to increase patrols and implement various investigative techniques, the police were unable to apprehend the killer. Several suspects were questioned and released due to insufficient evidence or alibis. The failure to capture Jack the Ripper led to public outrage and a loss of confidence in the police's ability to protect the community. Media response. The Jack the Ripper case generated intense media attention, both in London and beyond. Newspapers sensationalized the murders, often publishing graphic details and illustrations to attract readership. The media coverage fueled public panic and shaped the public's perception of the crimes and the killer. The circulation of letters purportedly written by Jack the Ripper, such as the infamous From Hell letter, added to the media frenzy. These letters taunted the police and press, further captivating the public's imagination. Journalists competed to break new developments and theories, resulting in a flood of often conflicting information. Government response. The government faced mounting pressure to address the Jack the Ripper murders. The Home Secretary, responsible for law and order, offered rewards and assistance to aid in the capture of the killer. The government also authorized the deployment of additional police forces to Whitechapel and provided financial support to the investigation. As the murders continued and public fear persisted, the government faced criticism for its failure to apprehend the killer. The lack of progress in the investigation highlighted issues of social inequality, poverty, and inadequate living conditions in the Whitechapel area, prompting calls for social reform. Public sentiment. The citizens of London, particularly those living in Whitechapel, were gripped by fear and anxiety during the reign of Jack the Ripper. Prostitutes and those associated with the sex trade felt particularly vulnerable. Women, in general, were afraid to walk the streets alone at night. Public meetings and rallies were held to discuss the crimes and demand action from the authorities. The gruesome nature of the murders and the killer's continued elusiveness fueled speculation and fear. The public's trust in the police diminished, as did their faith in the government's ability to protect them. The case ignited discussions on social issues, poverty, and the plight of marginalized communities, highlighting the stark inequalities of Victorian London. In conclusion, the police response to the Jack the Ripper murders faced criticism for its failures. The media coverage sensationalized the crimes, the government faced pressure to act, and the citizens of London experienced a mix of fear, outrage, and calls for social reform. The Jack the Ripper case left an indelible mark on London's history and continues to captivate the public's imagination to this day. The legacy of Jack the Ripper extends far beyond the actual crimes. The case has become one of the most infamous and enduring unsolved mysteries in criminal history. It has captivated the public imagination for over a century, inspiring countless books, films, and theories attempting to unmask the true identity of the Ripper. To this day, the true identity of Jack the Ripper remains unknown. The lack of definitive evidence, the passage of time, and the destruction of many relevant records have made it highly unlikely that the case will ever be definitively solved. Jack the Ripper's crimes continue to fascinate people as a chilling reminder of a dark chapter in Victorian-era London.